Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the September 6, 2023 work session. Angela, can I get a roll call, please?
Roll call Mylan,
Present.
Mulvaney Henry,
Here.
Bryant, Gonzalez,
Here.
Groneman,
Here.
Haley.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening, please?
So moved.
Second. Motion to approve the agenda has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call Mylan,
Aye.
Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Groneman,
Aye.
Haley.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move to the board update / GM update, and we'll go with the board first. Do any of the board members have anything to report from any committee meetings or anything?
I attended a committee meeting in Public Works and Safety last Monday. There was nothing on their agenda that pertained to the public utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Groneman.
Stated again.
Economic Development, Madam Chair, Economic Development and Finance did not meet, or there was nothing on the agenda, and so they did not meet this month, will not meet this.
All righty, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Mylan?
Zero.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Nothing.
All righty. Bill, you want to update here, update later in the regular?
Yeah, let me update later. Just go ahead and yield all my time to Maurice and his team. If we have time at the end, I've got a brief statement I'll make, but
Sounds good. I think we're going to go with our corporate compliance update. Mr. Moss.
Good afternoon. I'll go ahead and start. Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Moss, Executive Director of Corporate Compliance. And today we're going to basically give you a little update on what's happening in corporate compliance. And like always, I like to start off with like what the purpose and what the reason why we have corporate compliance. And then we'll go into risk management department, NERC compliance department, environmental compliance department. And so you get to meet some new people and see some familiar faces. So I think it'd be a great update. And so we'll go ahead and kick this off. So the purpose and role of corporate compliance is basically to ensure the utilities within our regulatory and legal boundaries. When you start looking at what we do as a utility, there's a number of statutes that we are required to follow. From the environmental side to the NERC side, the North America Electric Reliability Corporation, to a handful of just other things that just really impact the utility, but also that we're required to do. We make sure we follow the standards and minimize risk. One, the risk of regulatory and compliance is there's always a risk of new rules changing, and we have to be updated and we have to know what's changing to make sure we'll comply with those. And so that's one of the things we're always following, and you'll hear AJ and Ingrid talk about that, how they do that for both of their departments. Next is maintain reputation and foster trust. If you ever look at EPA, it's one of the things why it was basically formed. It was for that trust factor to make sure companies are doing what they are supposed to do. And so it's one of those things where you have a violation at the EPA or you have a violation at a regulatory agency, the trust factor for your customers is gone. And your customers don't trust you because the regulatory agency doesn't trust you. And so we want to make sure, number one, that we maintain that consistency with our customers, but also we avoid any penalties due to non-compliance. So there's usually financial penalties that come with any type of violation of our standards or statutes that we are supposed to follow, but also for the health and safety of the community as well. Going back to environmental laws, that's why they're there, for the health and safety of the community. So long as we're following what we need to do. Next, corporate compliance is like rowing. You want to make sure you're rowing in the same direction. Everyone's doing it at the same pace, at the same time, and we're going have the same goals. Once you have one person that's rowing faster or slower, it kind of makes the boat goes back and forth, right? And I'm not sure if you call it a rowing boat a boat. So I apologize if it's not calling both, but if you're rolling faster, it hurts you getting to where you need to go in your goal. So once we have everyone on the same page, that's from the operation side to the compliance side, admin side, wherever, who has a role in compliance, we want to make sure we're going that same direction. We have that same type of goal, and it's to be compliant, but better yet, to be compliant and know that we're minimizing risk as well. As you can see under corporate compliance, we have risk management, NERC compliance, and environmental compliance. And so next, I'm going to talk about first risk management. I've talked about that in the past with you guys, and I'm going to talk about it again, and I'll probably have some follow-up later this year regarding risk management. But the purpose of risk management is to identify, asset, assess, mitigate. So you identify the risk, you assess the risk and see what's the impact on your operations, and then you mitigate that risk. Mitigation can take the form of a number of things. It could be insurance, it could be from us standard operating procedures, new policies for the utility to make sure we don't go outside those boundaries that we are required to follow by law or by statute. And so what we do to make sure, number one, we identify, we have that risk out there. What can we do to mitigate that risk? And so it also makes sure we protect the long-term success of the utility. And so if you have your eye on what's coming down the pipe and you see a significant risk and it's on our radar, then it doesn't catch us by surprise and we can go ahead and mitigate it, or we could be aware of it and be able to position ourselves at a better place to be able to take on that risk. Next is the responsibilities under risk management, enterprise risk management, insurance management, which I'm here to talk to you today about, and regulatory risks or opportunities. I always like to put opportunities there because necessarily every risk, sometimes there's opportunity for us to participate in such a way that we avoid the risk, but we also have opportunity for the utility. So insurance overview. Last board meeting, if you recall, we had a great presentation from safety. They did a presentation over everything they have changed and mitigated since the team has really been stood up with Jeff got here, our manager of safety. And so it's one of those things where they've done such great work. And I felt that it was, a great time for us to have a conversation about insurance. You have all these near misses and you talk about liability and everything else, but you got to need to understand where our insurance plays a role into that. So that's why I felt today, Bill and I discussed that this would probably be a great presentation for you. So first we'll kick off with property. So our property insurance, as you see, there's an annual premium there of 2.2 million. And that's a premium that I said rises 10 to 12% a year. That's what we pay annually for our property insurance. And our property insurance covers our physical assets as just similar to this building, but also our power plant as well. We've noticed a rise in those premiums, especially here recently after COVID with supply chain being a major issue. So the replacement costs to any loss has been pretty significant. And so as the replacement costs we're seeing from our operations side, Jeremy's group, they have significant delays and they're seeing the cost rise. That's the same way for the insurance. When you have a loss, you still have to replace it. And so when you see that, they take into account those supply chain issues, but also inflation. So we're seeing that continually rise. And so your property insurance basically covers any damage received from fires, tornadoes, anything like that. Our excess liability insurance is hovers around 1 million. And we usually see, again, increases between 9 to 12% year over year. Those increases are usually fueled by wildfires out west, but also here recently, Hawaii, that's another one. Hurricanes fuel that excess liability as well. But once you start seeing that happen across the United States, it has an impact on our insurance as well. The insurance market for utility hardened to the point where there's only about three insurance companies that actually provide this type of coverage for utility companies. So we're kind of don't have many players in the room. So it's a really hard game. It's something once you have it, you kind of keep it. And so excess liability provides that excess liability above our self-insured requirement. So as we were talking about last time at last board meeting regarding the safety event and when we have a loss, we're self-insured on a lot of that stuff, meaning our revenue, basically our revenue is taking care of it, right? So when we have a loss of $30,000, $40,000, it's paid for by the utility. It's not paid for by insurance. And so once we hit a certain dollar amount with our excess liability or property, it has basically a minimum requirement, a deductible essentially, that we have to cover that ourselves before we hit that dollar mark before insurance take fold. So this is almost like these extreme scenarios where it reduces our risk and caps our risk. So we know where our highest risk is once we hit that dollar. Next is D&O and fiduciary insurance. Policy, sorry. D&O should be a particular for director and officers, it's basically insurance for you guys. It's for our board members. So when you're acting in your fiduciary duties as a board member, that liability insurance is for you. So if someone want to sue you personally as a board member of the board, there would be insurance for you to be basically covered for any liability or even legal fees that might take to basically represent yourself. Also, we'll have the one unified government that will have some representation as well. So
Hey, Maurice, what are the limits on that?
for the D&O, the limit is 15 million.
Thank you.
And so, one of the things for fiduciary insurance is a little bit different. We have our retirement accounts, our pension, and that is used for those members, our pension administrator that manage that side of the house. And so that is basically fueled by how much money is actually in the revenues for the pension plan. And so that provides that coverage for that fiduciary duty while they're doing that pension role. So anyone that believes they have been wrong in their pension, they could sue and say, I'm suing the pension administrator, or I'm suing a board member of that. They're protected under this policy. Next is excess workers' comp. It's a little bit different. Excess workers' comp is actually a statutory requirement by the state of Kansas. We're required to have it. And so excess workers' comp is basically anything in doing your job or your duties at work that's in that line of duty, it'd be covered under workers' comp. Excess workers' comp is anything basically over 750,000. We're self-insured up to that dollar amount. So as Jeff was talking last time, when we have injuries, safety, we actually fill that directly. So when someone gets injured on the job, we're paying for the work comp, from basically our budget. And so the excess work comp is anything above that 750,000 that would be taken care of. Next is auto liability insurance, and I think this is a little bit unique one. If you look into it from the standpoint that it's only 22 vehicles, it's only our take-home vehicles. And so our take-home vehicles are the vehicles that our operation use to take home so they'll be able to respond to emergency while they're at home. And so those are the vehicles that's covered under the auto liability insurance. And so our regular drive around vehicles that people report to work, and then again, the vehicle, those are self-insured. But also if they're parked at the office and there was a tornado hit, they'll be under that property insurance at that time.
You can
Yes.
talk, not just the premiums, but what are the deductibles for some
Okay.
property and
So
excess liability?
yes, so our property is actually a deductible of 2 million. So we have to have a loss per occurrence of 2 million in order for it to kick in. We haven't had a claim under that. We've had a fire. I don't believe it was actually a claim, so we did put them on notification, but I don't believe we hit that dollar amount. The next is our excess liability insurance is 1 million. Excess liability insurance is 1 million is our deductible. So we have to hit that 1 million mark before it even kicks in, and then it goes up to 35 million. Next is D&O and fiduciary. It's 350,000. And so we did basically went out to insurance. They used to be separate in the past, and we basically binded these two together because that's save a little bit of money and made sense. And so now it's 350,000 for the deductible, but it's 15 million for the limit. And like I said, excess work comp is statutory. It's 750,000 is the limit. And so once we go over that, that's when that kicks in. And then for just your regular auto liability insurance is similar to what you have at home. It's $1,000. So 500,000, but ours is 1,000. And so it's quite a bit for us to have claims under that. You can imagine it's a pretty big loss for us to have the claim on it. And that's what it's for. It's more for that higher end extreme event.
So we have a water truck or a bucket truck and it's out running around on the streets and it's in an accident,
Yes,
that's not covered under the auto liability.
it's not, no.
So if they hit how does that?
It would be, let's say they have a wreck, we would, it's self-insured, we will cover that ourselves. And this is more similar to most utilities, it's self-insured, they cover it ourselves. Just because the number of vehicles you have running around, most insurance companies won't cover that number of vehicles. They have a self-insured point. As far as, let's say,
Is
with-
there a lid? Is it?
it is a lid. I'm glad you asked that question. All of it kind of work together. So let's say your auto liability insurance, you're driving around, bucket truck in a pretty bad wreck, hits a school bus. You have a
I was gonna
large.
say that, but I didn't.
I'm sorry, I'm heartless. I feel bad now.
Pick the worst case scenario.
I was thinking of $1 million.
I was thinking it, I didn't want to say it.
So you have a large loss, right? Let's say we're talking about $10 million, right? Well, you'll have the self-insured, but that's when we'll go over to the excess liability. And that's where when we hit that dollar amount, our excess liability will cover us.
Okay.
So I'd like to remind the board that several years ago, they decided, because there is a cap, there's a statutory cap of 100,000 for an accident. Single occurrence in Kansas. So that would be your cap, except that the board directed that to continue the purchase of the excess liability insurance for the scenario that was just mentioned. So now your cap is the insurance purchased. If you didn't have insurance, it would be the 500,000 for anyone that was injured in the single occurrence.
And the reason why I wanted to get that out there, because yes, there's a lot of out-of-pocket expenses, payouts that BPU would have to go through before the insurance even kicks in. You can see what the premiums are just to have the insurance. One thing, Tom, you probably remember is the electrocution in Rosedale and then how the cap kicked in with that. So that was not an auto accident, but it was, something that BPU was held responsible for. And then there was certainly lawsuits and a settlement that came with that, so.
So Maurice, on the
Yes.
property, since some properties would be worth more, I mean, I'm assuming that's all physical property.
It's all physical property, yes.
So,
Every couple of years, we'll go back and go around and reassess what the value of.
oh, okay, so they're evaluated individually
Yes.
for,
So
so
we-
if something happened down at Caw, which we don't
Yeah.
use, that it's covered for whatever.
Well,
That's-
not technically call, no.
It's not,
Call is, we rolled out the insurance, so we don't have operations down there anymore.
right,
Thus, if a tornado hit it, we probably would be
out of,
out of pocket any, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
that was kind of where I was going. Things that we aren't really using are not covered.
We're not, yeah, and we're trying to, we'll be talking about our plans for call. So,
And to that, that's a great question. The way that works, we have a schedule, and that schedule, the insurance company has our property on there. And there's an inflation factor. We send them every year. That inflation factor, we'll ask them, hey, our inflation factor is this, and they kind of like argue back like, oh, we believe it's this. And usually it makes sense how they're getting their inflation factor. We believe their inflation factor is going too fast. We can ask for an independent assessment of our actual property and question and have argument, but no, we don't believe our property's that. And we can go through that. A couple utilities here in the region have went through that process of assessment, arguing with the insurance company, believing their property's lower than it should be based on inflation.
Okay.
Next slide. This is a new one. We're talking about corporate compliance and all the safety stuff the last board meeting. I think this is a great one to bring this time up. Most companies you see, you have a whistleblower hotline. You have that ability to report out when you see something, say something, you always see that stuff. And so we never really had a formal way for people to anonymously report something, an event. Let's say, and this is more towards compliance, safety, that type of realm, into our policies or our standard operating procedures. So basically corporate compliances went out and hired a independent third party. And this third party is used for multiple utility companies. It's used for Midwest Reliability Organization, used for Southwest Power Pool as well. And it's basically a third party that allows whistleblowing. You can send multiple ways of reporting. It could be a toll-free number, a website, email, postal, fax. Any way the person can whistleblow and be anonymous. It gives them a case number and then it goes through that third party. The only thing we get is an email and a case number, and then we investigate at that time. It does allow for open exchange that you can go back and forth with the person if you need some more clarity around where the event occurred or who, the supervisor involved or something occurring. It does allow for that to happen as well. And so this is new. We'll be rolling this out in the next 2 weeks. It's on right now, but we still need to meet internally to make sure everything's working out and make sure we do some testing of the emails and stuff and who's receiving them and stuff like that. In the past and my experience and then the experience with the actual company, the company is the Lighthouse System is what it's called, but it's with Centrio is the name of the company. And so, they have an average. They look at the average they've seen is usually between 5 and 7 reports a year. This is not something that should be burning up the hotlines or we have other issues we need to address. But this is something to make sure someone feels uncomfortable being around a bunch of people and say, hey, I don't feel safe doing that they have an avenue to say, hey, we're doing this and I don't feel safe doing it. Or, hey, we're dumping oil into the river. Yeah, I'll just make sure you ever heard that. We're dumping oil, into the river or something like that. That allows an avenue to make sure, number one, we can address the issue and then that person doesn't save face with their coworkers. Or anything like that.
Okay, so question on that one.
Yes.
Sounds fantastic, don't get me wrong. So the third party, a complaint is made, some type of report is made, I won't say complaint,
Yes.
some report is made. This goes to a third party. The third party notifies somebody here.
Yes.
Probably you.
Yes.
Some others.
Yes, mothers, yes.
That this is the nature of the complaint.
Mhm.
Doesn't identify an individual. And assigns a case number to it.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, so BPU goes investigates X, then what happens?
We investigate X and then we'll follow our regular channel of how we do our investigation. That'd be Dennis's group. They'll go down, review it, see if it we have findings, then we'll go ahead, corrective action. And then the report will go back and say it's closed. They won't know what occurred. So that's similar how we do any type of investigation. We don't go back to the person and say, this is what occurred. We'll say it has been addressed and it's closed. Or we have reviewed it, it's closed. And that's something we're working this with still to format what we need to say back to the employee, but it's going to be the same.
Is this consistent with our whistleblower policy? Because we have one.
Yes, but it's consistent with everything. We do not release any employee discipline. So if a change has been made, like just a general change, that would, and it didn't deal with the security measure, we wouldn't say, well, we put up cameras here, and there. But if, we may say, we might release a statement that we made a change, but we would certainly never name names or release discipline.
Okay.
And can I go back a little bit on the errors and admissions? The
Sure.
board has, as long as the board is acting within its official duty, within their duty, you have a lot of protection under state law where the insurance wouldn't even come into play. So I just want to reassure you there that a lot of that is redundant because you have a lot of.
I wasn't even worried. I just.
Okay.
Curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted you to know that a lot of that is redundant because you have Kansas law provides you, as long as you're acting in, within the confines of your official capacity, you're really protected.
So I'd like to go ahead and thank God for our state legislators right now.
One thing that we talked about here is making sure that this anonymous hotline stays anonymous and we're protecting the rights of the individual actually doing the reporting. And we're actually following up on any action that really needs to be taken taken serious or take, that needs to take place, and, otherwise it's subject to fail if we're not following through and doing what we're saying we're gonna do.
Sure.
Well, and so that's in my presentation for the risk management approach. I have two great people here, and first is going to be AJ Copel. I just introduced him earlier, and then we have Ingrid Setzler here for Director of Environmental Compliance. And so just want to say both of them have been great from the standpoint of SME subject matter experts in their field. I would say they are probably top notch from the standpoint of just being people that not only we rely on the utility, but we rely other utilities call and contact all the time. Ingrid's presenting here in a couple of weeks at a conference that's in Overland Park where she's a subject matter expert. So by them being good at their job, they make my job a lot easier. And so AJ, you want to come over and sit in the driver's seat, and I'll still here and tackle you and.
Thanks, Maurice.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for that very nice introduction. Okay, so yes, my name is AJ Kaufel. He just introduced me. I'll give you kind of a background. This is my first time addressing the board, so I appreciate the time. And I'm happy to kind of tell you what our department is doing. So my name is AJ Kaufel. I have been here since May of 2022, so May of last year. Before that, I was over at Evergy, formerly KCPL. I was a senior compliance consultant on the O&P side. And then prior to that, I spent 5 years doing the SIP side. And if O&P and SIP get confusing, I'm going to go over the differences between those standards here during this presentation. So if you can go to the first slide. This is the department makeup. There's 4 of us really in the NERC department. We report up to Maurice. And so as you see, we've got 3 people under me. Stephen McGee, he's been here for about 7-8 years. Owen, he's our senior SIP specialist. We just got him, very lucky to get him. He's very knowledgeable in that area. And then Ashley Calderon, she is our NERC coordinator, and she's really supports both of the entire group, actually. And she's starting to learn the different positions and the jobs. And so she's doing very well there too. So, and I do want to say I talk very quickly. So if you want to get a question in, just stop. Starting out really quick, what is NERC? The North American Electric Reliability Corporation. This was formed as a result of the 2003 Northeast blackout. Congress enacted the Energy Policy Act of 2005, which gave really NERC the ability to create, implement, and enforce reliability standards for a bulk power system. Additionally, this policy also created the regional entities, and these are the different regional entities across the North America, mainly the US, some in Canada and Mexico, but these are the regional entities that come in and audit us. They're the ones that spot check us and ensure that we are doing what we are required to do under the NERC standards. And the one that we fall into now is the Midwest Reliability Organization, and I'll sometimes refer to MRO. And then we've got the responsibilities down here of our department, and I'm going to kind of do really high level on this one because I get more in depth into it in a slide here. So our department really partners with the different departments out there. I mean, with operations, with IT or HR, any of these departments that have NERC processes, and they're required to meet the certain thresholds defined by NERC. We also are monitoring, where we are in compliance. If we have an issue, we're monitoring it where we're helping the business or the departments to get it mitigated and all of that. And then we're also reporting that up to the leadership and the executive staff. So right here, we got the number of standards, and these are not overall, these are the ones that are actually applicable to BPU. So on the left side, you got your SIP, which got 12 standards. And out of those 12 standards, you got 36 requirements, and there's a lot of sub requirements, but I didn't want to go into that much detail. Critical infrastructure protection, these standards are really protecting your cyber assets. So this is kind of the cyber side of the NERC standards. Operations and planning on the right side has 57 standards that are applicable to BPU. Out of those 57, they have 255 requirements and many, many more sub-requirements. The operations planning, this is more for how you operate the grid, how you model the grid. Your preventative maintenance and testing requirements for your equipment out in the field. So those span a lot of different areas, but it's really focused on the operations side. So here, this is kind of where I was going to get into what our department does. The assurance monitoring and auditing pieces is something new that we put in. Maurice wanted us to have something out there, so we put this in last year. And this is really annually we go through and we risk rank, what our high risk requirements are based upon different factors, which could include what the industry's focus on, what the monetary value of penalties would be, and a lot of different requirements. We plan for the next year, and then we basically go in and do mini audits of these, and we go through and we look at the different departments and look at the evidence in there, and we determine, hey, we're in compliance, or we're not in compliance, and then we follow those processes. This also helps us identify internal controls that we can help with the different processes out there. We can help the departments identify efficiencies in their processes. We can help add automation and cut down complexity of processes to help us keep within the compliance requirements while reducing the burden of compliance on the actual departments. Additionally, we participate in a lot of external meetings. This includes not only with NERC, MRO, but with SPP, peer sharing groups. So we get a lot of information. We're out there listening, we're out there collaborating with different utilities to see how everyone else is doing. For new standards and revised standards, we are watching them from the point of creation till the effective date. We're getting all this information, and so we will actually sample and do a kind of a mini audit on a standard before it's effective to ensure that we are compliant today, that it is effective. And that also, we also provide training. We provide training if there's a lack of understanding about what the expectations are under some of the NERC standards requirements. And that really kind of all ties up into number 6, department outreach. If they have questions, they contact us, and then we tell them, this is what we see across the industry, and this is how people are interpreting that standard. Because believe it or not, so they're sometimes vague, and they can be open to interpretation. So you've got to get that input and see from all the different areas. And so regulatory tracking, this is kind of what we're talking about readiness assessment. So the standards in NERC are written by the industry. So we do actually have some folks here at BPU that are on some of these standard drafting teams or implementation teams. So we can participate in that, and that way we can help mold how the standards are written and what makes sense to us. So we can have some input that way. We also are sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I was going so quickly there. So yeah, we have people on the teams, and then we also participate like with APPA. I'm sure you're all aware of APPA. If we have concerns with the new standard or revisions come through, we can work with them, voice our concerns, and they can go out there and voice those for us. And we can work with also, legal representation and stuff like that. And this is my final slide. I know I only had a few minutes here, so I'm kind of moving through very quickly, but these are the big ticket items that I see coming down that will affect BPU, or has, I would say, because the cold weather standards, we went effective earlier this year for our first version of that. Really, it's to have a cold weather preparedness plan, which is pretty simple, right? They are enacting revisions to these standards based upon the Uri event. The current one that is effective, it was already being developed before Uri even happened back in, and so they're making modifications out of, what they had learned from Uri. So we've got some more changes to do on our, cold weather plan to meet those future state of those standards. SIP, internal network security monitoring. So the way the SIP works is typically they would be monitoring for communication on the outside of the network or on the edge of the network. SIP never focused on actually monitoring information from within the network from the different cyber assets. So once you're inside the environment, there was no requirement to monitor the communication within that. And this is really kind of because of the SolarWinds issue that occurred, they identified that, there could be instances where you install something on our system that lies dormant. And then, it can start reaching out at a specified time. So this is something that's gonna come down, and it's really gonna impact us on really our more critical areas. But they haven't really defined how much of this is gonna happen. So this is the one that's coming down, that's gonna be big. And then the final one I've got up here is a FERC, the ambient adjustable ratings. This is something that was done for the market to try to make it easier for power to flow across the system. Currently we have static ratings based upon whether it was in the summer or we had different, summer, fall ratings, winter ratings, spring ratings, and they're static. So we're gonna have to actually move to every hour, we have to send ratings up for our lines based upon whether it's day or night and what the temperature is. And so this is a FERC change, but it is going to change a lot of the things that we have to do on the NERC side to allow us to operate in this way. So this is still being kind of figured out by SPP and the industry as a whole, but this is going to change a lot. So, sorry. Now, I think I went through pretty quickly.
You back up,
What's that?
you back up to so on the ambient adjustment ratings, how is that gonna impact the power flows off the Evergy system, across the BPU system, and then it's back into the Evergy system? So we have to be coordinated together across this entire network, right?
Right.
So our ratings would have to match up with Genesee Power and Light or Evergy's reporting at our tie points.
I haven't looked at it from the tie points. I just know that we are gonna have to establish our line ratings,
Right.
just our lines. I mean,
Right.
and then we submit them all to SPP and we say, basically give them the criteria. And then they would be the ones monitoring those.
The line ratings on their system and our system tied together
Right.
as to,
I don't have that answer for you right now, but it's something that we can figure out.
all right, okay.
Are there any other questions?
So once those standards are in place, like this, there's 12 standards for SIP, do they change? I mean, they surely can't stay
Right.
the same. So what creates a change in the standard? I think you said it, but I.
Yeah, FERC can drive those changes based upon what's going on, what they think, what they see risk is. They'll instruct NERC to change. And they'll say, hey, these are the risks we're seeing out there and we need this one we need an additional one. Like this one right here. This is kind of where internal network security monitoring came. But it can also come out of industry. Industry is confused about something or they're misinterpreting, so they can do some revisions, so yeah, it changes a lot. I mean. Right. Right. And they're doing they're reaching out to the industry and getting input right now on the physical security of those. So they're kind of reaching out and getting how the industry feels. Then they'll come back and make a determination well, how do we need a standard? If we do, let's start creating one.
Is a SIP audit every year?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years?
Yes, and it's typically SIP and OMP.
What is a line rating?
Okay, so I'm not an engineer, but it's basically the amount of power that you can push over the line without burning it up. I mean, that's a simple way of looking at it. So if it's colder out, you can push more, and that's the reasoning for these ambient adjustable temperatures.
so like in your house, Tom, you got a certain size cable that can carry so much current through it. Okay, you have a fuse to protect it. That fuse is sized to make sure that the wire don't burn. So the fuse is really what protects it. We got breakers that protect our lines, but they only have certain rating on how much power you can actually push through it before you were doing damage to your system.
Is there any other questions?
Oh,
Thanks, AJ.
Well, thank you.
thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Yep, nice to meet you all. Next, we have our Director of Environmental Compliance, and you guys know.
Batting cleanup.
What?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everyone. I think most of you know me. I'll be your old man. So good afternoon. My name is Ingrid Setzler. For those of you who don't formally know me, I don't think we've met formally. I am the Director for Environmental Compliance. I've been at BPU, I think 15 years now. And so I have two groups really under me, and that's what I call the air division and the non-air division. So we have air compliance and non-air. I have 3 environmental scientists on each side, each of which have a senior scientist that they can lead to, that kind of between me and the other 3. Next, please. Okay, so what is environmental department responsible for? So what we do basically in a nutshell is maintain compliance with all environmental regulations that impact the utility. Again, that has to do with air, non-air regulations. So if we think about the air side of life, you can think about perhaps the Clean Air Act as one. There's others, but I've just, for simplicity, tried to mention just a few on each of these. So the Clean Air Act regulations include some of our air emissions and our limits that we have at our power plants and other things, including even emergency generators and engines that we have around the utility. We have permitted limits that we have to meet for each. We ensure compliance with what we call a continuous air emissions system, which we have at our power plant. That basically has a lot of requirements with it, including another system that we call the NetDAS that gathers all of our numbers that we use for reporting. And we have to make sure that data is accurate. There's a lot of calibrations and other things that go along with it. We have plans. This is just one example. The best practice and maintenance plans that we review a lot of these all the time, on at least annually, if not more, if there's a change of something or an upgrade of a piece of equipment that we use for reporting. We do a whole lot of reporting to EPA and KDHE, both on the air and non-air side, and other agencies as necessary. I also do a lot of negotiations or with permits and other things with EPA and KDHE when it comes to environmental rules and regulations and laws. On the non-air side, for simplicity, we could think maybe about the Clean Water Act. We have permits for all of our facilities. Well, I shouldn't say all. So we have Quindaro Power Station, Nearman Creek Power Station, and Nearman Water that have some Clean Water Act related permits, National Pollution Discharge permits that we deal with. Another regulation we meet and follow is the Resource Conservation Recovery Act. This has a lot to do with hazardous waste that's around the utility that we manage. It also involves coal combustion residuals rule, falls under that regulation. We have spill prevention plans across the utility that largely pertains to oil. So not just a 55-gallon drum of oil, but it's our large tanks, oil-filled equipment, anything like that that may could release or has potential to release. We have risk management plans that's specific to Nearman Water Treatment Plant. We do a lot of asbestos work around the utility at all locations, even service center for anything that may come up, or renovations, certainly the power plants. PCBs, so PCBs are found commonly in our transformers or substations. We've eliminated a lot of those, but we still have some. So with that said, my department does emergency response for the utility. Someone in our department's on call 24/7. And that largely is, again, for any type of spills. We also handle recycling. And so this, I'm not talking about the cup you throw away in the recycle bin or the can in your office. This is related to waste that's generated throughout the utility. And instead of, sending it off to an incinerator or a landfill, we try to find other uses that we're reducing our impact to the world, to at least Kansas, right? Next slide. So we have a lot of environmental requirements. These these are fluid, so they're ever changing, as you all are aware, new regulations come out. And these get adjusted accordingly, right? So currently we have 40 air requirements and about 100 non-air requirements. Next slide, please. And so how do we ensure compliance with all of these? Well, as AJ mentioned, he did a great job, so I'm not going to go too deep in this, but we have the assurance monitoring auditing plan that Maurice instituted, I believe about a year ago. And again, this is doing a detailed review. I'll pick 10 air items and 10 non-air items, and we'll go through and I delegate it to my staff. We're looking at a detailed review of each program, one specific part of that program, right? Because that program's quite large. And so with that, we'll identify any weaknesses and make any corrections. Recently, we just did one and, I developed a log for, making things a little bit smoother, findings and things like that for a plan that identified a small weakness, but at least, it works, right? Internal controls. So many years ago, I instituted environmental compliance procedures. We have about currently 165 environmental compliance procedures. And these, a lot of companies outsource this to other groups to do this for them. We do this internal. I worked with our IT department. And so what that does is that generates emails to us, sends emails to my team before something is due. So it keeps us on our toes, it allows hopefully nothing to slip through the cracks. We also do a lot of inspections. We're all over the utility. We're not at just one location. We're not just at Nearman. We're, like I mentioned before, at the service center and distribution, electric ops, power production, water operations, that sort of thing. We do a lot of external participation. We mentioned APPA already, so we are deeply involved with them and engaged with them. And we also have other resources as well. But as far as readiness assessment, I gotta tell you the best one is I just read EPA's regulatory agenda. Comes out twice a year. It'll tell you everything that they're going to propose on the spring and fall agenda. Currently, the spring agenda has about 147 proposed regulations that I've looked at. 53 of those impact BPU. Some are small, minor changes that just have to do with a definition change or something like that. But the others that we're looking at, I think there's about 17 still that are to be proposed here sometime from now to the end of the year. So
of those, with the time you have, which one or two are you mostly concerned with?
can I answer that in the next slide?
Yes.
Next
Okay.
slide. I think there's 17 yet to be issued or proposed. We filed comments on 6 already, and I'll talk about those here in a minute. We do a lot of training, and we do training again throughout the utility. A lot of that is federally mandated. So we also have our own internal trainings that we have to keep up on for our certifications to allow us to do our jobs. We're always working with other departments. And next slide. Okay, regulatory tracking. How do we do that? Again, as I mentioned before, I'm looking at the EPA agenda. APPA does the same thing. We'll work with APPA. I also use APPA as a tool. We have legal counsel that assist as well. Quite frankly, I work with EPA and KDHE. We have a great relationship. So other stakeholders, we also have a good relationship with other Kansas utilities that will come together as a group. In fact, I'll be working and setting up meetings with respect to one regulation here this fall that I'll talk about in a minute. So you get a wealth of information. And if you keep those lines of communication open with those regulatory agencies, you're ahead of the game, at least I feel. I represent us again, the utility to those agencies as well. You're okay. Future regulations now, so this may or may not answer your question. The comments that we filed, the new source performance standards, that has to do with the greenhouse gas regulation. Those were due here at the beginning of the month, I think on the 8th of August. If you guys, if y'all recall, the Clean Power Plan back in the day that first came out years ago, that rule got stayed. We were literally weeks away from a state plan that we had to work with the state and get submitted to EPA. That rule got stayed. Then under Trump administration, they came out with Affordable Clean Energy Rule. Same thing. We were about a month away from submitting that to the state, which then has to go through their regulatory process, the legislative folks up at Topeka. And that then got stayed as well. So what came out recently was the new greenhouse gas rule. We did provide comments on that via APPA. There have been over 1 million comments filed to that rule. So EPA has their hands full to read through those comments and digest those comments. And interestingly enough, kind of in AJ's world, FERC filed comments as well as the regional transmission organizations, right? So the RTOs there, and that has to do with grid reliability, right? For what they've proposed, a lot of it's carbon capture, hydrogen, some other things. And I don't want to go too deep in it, but we're counting on lawsuits. We're counting on it to change, but that still doesn't prevent us as a utility and other utilities in Kansas to have to still work towards a state plan. So I'll be organizing those meetings with KDHE here this fall. I did get an email from the director of KDHE at or Bureau of Air stating that the deputy secretary had requested to meet and get informed on this. So those are all the preliminary steps that happened there in Topeka. Proposed MATS, mercury toxic standards rule, if you guys recall that. That's the reason we put all the air quality controls in Nearman 2015, 2016. So they came out with a second MATS rule, and this had to do with, well, everybody's meeting that limit and they're all doing a little bit better. So let's make the standards a little bit more stringent. So we filed comments on that as well. We, as proposed, we don't really have any concerns. BPU, we did such a great job during the first round. And some of the equipment that we have is already in place and some other things that I won't go into now, but so as proposed, it could change, but as proposed, we don't have concerns. There's also something called the Good Neighbor Rule, and that has to do with the 2015 ozone NAAQS, and that affects the cross-state air pollution rule. And that really impacts us. Eventually we'll be brought into it. We filed comments on that. This has to do with allocations and allowances and budgets for emissions, and EPA kind of changed the look of things. There used to be a lot of what we call group 2 states and group 3 states. Now there's only 2 group 2 states, which is Kansas and Iowa. So you can imagine that bucket of allowances just went really, really small and price went way up. And so we filed comments. There's lawsuits over this currently by some states. And so I did also speak to the White House OMB via APPA. It was myself and a couple other utilities with APPA back in March. So there's a lot of uproar about this, and I do think that it's going to change. Potentially, we'll see what happens with the litigation. On the non-air side, one that I'll mention is again, the coal combustion residuals rule. That has to do with our ash. You know, when you burn coal, you get the byproducts of flue gas desulfurization or bottom ash. Back in 2015, this rule came out. I closed a couple of our landfills. And if you all remember, not too long ago, 21, I finalized the closure of our surface impoundment at Nearman Creek Power Station. And they've now come up with another part of this rule to address the ones that I closed. And not closure by removal. So they're trying to loop everybody into these regulations with this proposed CCR legacy rule for older landfills. The couple others we've reviewed, but didn't comment on is the PCBs and effluent limitation guidelines. Didn't warrant comment. So those are a few. As I mentioned, there's 17 still out to come that we haven't seen yet. And that's really all I have. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but
Ingrid, I don't have a question, but the comments that we provided through APPA on the new source performance standards and the cross-state air pollution program. Can we see those?
yeah,
I mean, if there's a public place, I can find them all.
they're on the docket.
The
But
document.
I do, but I could also just send them to you or send them to Angela.
Yeah, if you send them to me, I'll distribute it to
Okay.
all the board members.
Okay. Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Just those two, right?
Just those two.
Okay.
You bet.
We've talked about, I think it's good, to have this conversation here. Why is it, I guess, why is the state of Kansas so reluctant to come up with a state energy plan? You know, when BPU and others have asked for this over and over and over.
So that's KCC, right? Can't, they typically have,
KCC, KDHE, why doesn't Kansas come up with a plan? Work closer with EPA as.
well, I don't know if I can answer on the KCC side. I know years ago we didn't want that and now we do. But on the, just saying, I'm talking back in 2014 and so, but now things have changed. Our world has changed. And KDHE does now, though, is implementing a climate plan. And there's funding to go along with that, which has to do with emission reductions and so forth. So this kind of comes from the governor who doesn't want to really set a number to it. And that has to do with the KDHE side. I can't speak on the KCC side. So I do know that comes from higher up.
Just this back and forth political thing that works on a national level, on the state level.
Yeah.
It's really impacting our community in the worst possible way.
Yeah. The good thing, and I've talked to Maurice about this though, is this funds that are going to be available through KDHE for environmental justice communities.
Right.
and So forth.
Any questions?
There's a summary up there, but it's the same time. We'll get to it. Summary of what, to talk about what we're doing again.
Can the board also get, I know we get it in our packets, so everybody calm down. Can I get that PowerPoint, please? Yes, thank you. That was excellent, by the way. Thank you all very much. Very good.
A lot of information. Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Don't be sorry. Hey, we've come so far in this whole issue from.
If these
There
rules
were.
workers begins to get more critical for us, then we'll certainly be back in front of the board talking about here's how we're trying to address and mitigate, the risk that's in front of us. So
Well, I was gonna say, that's that uncertainty is difficult to budget for.
it is,
not?
it is. And our budget, pretty thin margins. So that's why we do what we can to try to control our cost and keep moving forward too at the same time. So.
Awesome. Do I have a motion to adjourn, please? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Mary, I move to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Mylan, Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Brenneman,
Aye.
Haley.
All right.
That motion carries. The work session is adjourned.